Every organization knows excellence comes from education, especially us. We are educators who became an educational technologies business, united by one simple thought: we want to touch every learner on the planet. We are authors and instructional designers, editors and developers, designers and programmers, subject matter experts and friends. We design and build educational technologies and content that empower training providers to transfer knowledge to help companies and people meet their goals and make them more successful. We come to work every day to collaborate, build, make mistakes, and figure new ways to make training delivery better. Our quest for improvement is never over, and our mission is simple: design, build, and share educational technologies that matter. This means that any new training product in our suite of course content or technologies must improve our clients' success and be a significant improvement not only to that of our competitors, but also our own. We develop highly interactive e-learning and customizable instructor-led training materials for training providers. We build platforms that connect our customers to their learners. We help our clients to make learning accessible, fun, easy to administer, and customized to meet their needs. We love what we do, and we have fun doing it.
Velsoft has been in the e-learning space for over 20 years. We started as a courseware company, and developing training materials is still very much at the core of everything we do. Beyond being the learning content company, we now have an award-winning learning management system and an authoring tool that offers technologies not available anywhere else. Other innovations include an amazing interaction builder tool and the world's only corporate university in a box. What really makes Velsoft different is that everything we do is customizable.
We are continuously growing and improving. We love that we have the ability to give our clients the peace of mind of knowing they'll be delivering the very best education to their learners, even as the times and technology change. We serve a global community of training providers. We are Velsoft, and this is how we are changing the world.
All right, welcome to Trends in L&D for 2025. I am super excited to get going today. So I am Josh Randall, Sales Director at Velsoft. Just a little bit about me. I promise I don't talk about myself too much here. I've spent the last nearly decade working in the HR strategy, org development, L&D spaces, working on reskilling projects, organizational design, corporate academies, and all matter of L&D projects. I worked on training projects from teaching folks management fundamentals to advanced programming skills. And I absolutely love working with folks to try and solve complex learning challenges. Now, of course, this webinar wouldn't be possible without all the fantastic people behind the scenes at Velsoft. So I definitely want to send a shout out and thank you to them. They've worked very hard on putting all of this together. And for those of you who don't know or just missed that first little bit of the video there, Velsoft is a leader in digital education with over 20 years of experience serving 6,000 plus clients across a whopping 164 different countries, spanning all manner of training paradigms and material and working with all manner of clients. So with that, I'll hand it over to my co-host Michael to introduce himself.
A little bit about me. I'm a senior account executive here at Velsoft with 9 years experience assisting organizations really of all sizes with all manner of L&D endeavors, from content development to course content for their e-learning programs and helping create varied e-learning solutions. Very excited to be here with you all. So glad that you're here to learn more about trends in L&D in 2025. And yeah, so who's ready to get into it? Josh, you ready?
Absolutely. I'm totally ready. So today we're going to explore here how L&D is evolving from a support function to a strategic driver of business. That's really going to be the theme today. And it's really here hoping to talk about all the trends that may be coming up this year around that, which is, let's be honest, really turning out to be a very interesting year to say the least. So our goal here is to equip you with the strategies to build agile, measurable learning cultures that solve tomorrow's challenges. Now, Michael, you were talking to me this morning and you actually had a very interesting question. Did you want to go ahead and ask that again? I would love to give you an answer for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, Josh, essentially with L&D taking center stage at a lot of organizations, I mean, what's one trend that you're seeing right now that may be considered overhyped? And what trend may you be seeing that may be underestimated for 2025?
Excellent question, Michael. That's why I've been super excited to answer it. Now, I will say that my answer is a little bit of a cop out because it is the same answer to both questions. But it is AI. I'm sorry. I know everyone's probably getting a little bit sick of hearing about AI. Let's be honest. It's here to stay, and it's only going to increase in its trend. Now, why is it overhyped? It's overhyped because I think there are many organizations and many organizations who have business units even within them that are still struggling to even get into the digital age. That's less and less, but there is still a reality there. So AI is just a secondary layer on top of that. So to say that all organizations are going to be taken over by AI robots and we're going to be living some sort of high life and all the work being done for us, I don't think is in our immediate future. But I think that side of it is overhyped. On the flip side of that, I do think it's underestimated, particularly in L&D. Was actually watched a fantastic demonstration of somebody using a AI operator, using a ChatGPT model operator. I can't remember. There's so many new models anymore. It's hard to keep track. But they basically created an agent that ran through an e-course on L&D. They ran through the entire e-course, did all of the questions, and this wasn't a simple course. This actually was a complex course with thought processes, questions, and everything else involved. Went through the entire course, got the certificate, and the learner never actually once was in the course. So that's a perfect example of something that we're going to have to start looking out for in L&D. Those are kind of not only ethical challenges, but practical challenges and practical learning challenges when it comes to if your employees and students are actually learning. That's a real challenge that we're going to have to be in. I think we're underestimating that for 2025 and beyond. So thank you for that question, Michael. It's something that is both keeps me excited, but also keeps me up just a little bit at night. So all right, on to that. I just want to go over here a little bit of housekeeping. There's just a few items, nothing too major. I will ask folks, please use the tech chat to ask questions. We want your questions. We will do our best to get to all of them. We may very well not get to all of them. I hopefully will not be able to answer, and Michael will not be able to answer all of them. I'm hoping that we get a question that comes out of left field that we have literally no idea what the answer is. And what we'll do is we'll take that answer, we'll go research it, and we'll find an answer for you. So if you've got a burning question in L&D that you've just been dying to know and don't even know where to begin, send it to us. We probably have just as much interest to find that answer as you do. So please ask your questions in the chat. Technical support is available if you need it. If for some reason you're having difficulties accessing the YouTube channel or some sort of other issue while you're going through this, we will do our absolute best to help. Just send a quick note in the chat. We'll see what we can do. In terms of questions, there have been pre-submitted questions. We're going to, I've actually answered some of these to you individually beforehand, but I also haven't had a chance to answer all of them. So we're definitely going to answer some of those during the Q&A session, but I'll do my best to answer all the questions that come up during this actual webinar here as we go along. So please, like I said, ask your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. So on to our agenda today. So we've got a packed agenda. We're going to do our best to get through all of it and still leave time for questions here. So it's we've got a lot to cover in a little under an hour. So we'll see what we can do here. We're going to go over the current trends. We're going to in L&D. We're also going to go over the business trends as well. That is a very important piece. There is. We're going to go over modern goal settings in L&D, what that actually looks like. How do you actually hopefully meet those trends in the long term in 2025 going into 2026 as well? How do we actually sort of meet those and set goals? Then, of course, like I said, we're going to have a Q&A session. There's a conclusion as well, which is really just wrapping up and hopefully answering. We'll probably use more of that time, hopefully, for answering some Q&A questions. Yeah. So,
all right,
let's hop in. Want to kind of go. Yeah, let's hop in. We've got our are all of our, we should be coming up here now, our current trends here in L&D, which is personalized learning, micro learning, mobile learning. This is a big one, and you're going to see this both in business trends to some extent and our current trends, which is doing more with less. We're all being asked to that. I don't see that going away. Solving business problems, the reskilling and its related cousin, upskilling. And this one's kind of an exciting one. I really think, we've seen this trend for a while, and I think this is really going to be amplified this year, which is L&D is going to take center stage. We are going to be a driving force for change and progression and growth in organizations. So,
Absolutely.
on to the first one, which is personalized learning. So, what is personalized learning? What does that actually look like in practice? Okay, personalized learning is really about creating learning paradigms for your individual learners in your organization or the organizations that you serve that tailor to that individual adult learner's needs. It comes back to a core principle of andragogy, which is learning needs to be practical and it needs to be relatable for an adult learner to actually even want to do it. And we really need to look at ways in which to engage and which to develop out that personalized learning.
So
Michael, you had a
Josh,
question, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
just related to that. I mean, I guess what would you see right now as the biggest barrier to actually implementing personalized learning in an organization, and how an organization could potentially overcome that?
The biggest barrier is there's probably more than one, and I would say the biggest barrier is actually quite complex. But the biggest barrier here is the just the sheer ability to tailor the learning to that individual. How does one do that? Well, one does that by creating a learning environment that is tailored to that individual learner in that place, in that time, to what they need in that space. So in a corporate environment, the key here would be if you have a individual learner who needs to learn. We can just pick something made up, the cliche underwater basket weaving. If they need to learn underwater basket weaving for that time, to find ways in which to tailor that particular course to them. And
Right.
realistically, that involves talking and interviewing quantitatively and qualitatively the stakeholders involved. That is the learner, that is the supervisors and managers, that is, if you're in an educational environment, that is the external employers or external learning environment that you need to learn to sort of help involve that. How do you do that? Well, you align that to a skills taxonomy. How do you build a skills taxonomy? There's a lot that goes into that question as well. But the when it comes to a skills taxonomy, it's really about talking to the individual business unit, the individual learner, and really understanding what it is that they need to solve, what it is that they need to do, what it is that they need to learn, and then tailoring that individual content to that for that learning. And the reality is you're going to see, when you tailor that learning, when you personalize that learning, you're going to see huge improvements. In 2023, LinkedIn did a study and they said 70% of learners personalized content improved the engagement of the learners. If you're creating content that is not relevant, that is not personalized, realistically, people are not going to pay attention. And if you do personalize it, they will. It is quite honestly sometimes that simple.
So
And
not to
tools like AI
interrupt, Josh,
can
just for a
totally
second
help that.
there, with
Yeah.
personalized learning, how does that, I mean, how does that fit with in the realm of micro learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to micro learning, and micro learning is an interesting one. So micro learning has shifted over time. We've seen it called different things. We've seen it referenced different things a few years ago, and up until recently, we saw learning in the flow of work. That was kind of a trend and a fad. It's not going away, but I think it's becoming more refined. And micro learning is an area where you can take a course, break it apart over time, and give people the chance to learn and apply what they learn. It helps reduce that learning loss curve that happens over time. And that's where micro learning is really, really important, is it's really looking at breaking that up. And that's a great way to personalize it. So I think that's a
Right.
great question.
Well, how would you see, like, how would you ensure, though, that microlearning, I guess, for the organization doesn't become or feel fragmented or lose the depth that's needed to actually train on those particular skills?
Yeah, I think this kind of comes back to bring it full circle. That comes back to the skills taxonomy and really understanding what that is. So if you don't develop out your training with a end goal in mind, with an overall program design, especially when it comes to micro learning, that's where you're going to lose that depth, or it's really going to become fragmented. If you create a one-off course that's 5 minutes long on something, and you don't have somebody come back to it for a week and a half, they're really going to lose the understanding of that. Or if you do 5 minutes of this and then five something that's separate, and there's time in between, there's not a connection, and there's not an overall programming, you're gonna run into challenges. So I think, finding out that overall program, finding out what your end goals are in the actual learning is key to it not becoming fragmented. Another area I want to say is, how do you not lose depth? That's really the practicality of it is key here, and the habit of learning. If people are learning a little bit more every single day than spending 2 or 3 hours, it's like when we back in the past for exams. We can't cram for exam well, maybe some of us do, but we can't cram the night before an exam and expect to learn and retain all the material. It's just not possible.
Right.
So the real goal here is to, look at building those habits of learning and increasing the application of the learning they have in their everyday environment. Micro learning has shown to boost retention as well. So that's a nice benefit. There's learning, but traditional methods in comparison, micro learning boosts retention by 80%. So really thinking about those 5-minute modules on particularly inane things, but that actually have a lot of practical use, such as compliance updates, or this is a big one, is software shortcuts. So if someone's learning Excel and you're going to teach them quickly, and they use Excel every day, how to use an X lookup. For those of you who don't know, it's just a fancy way of looking stuff up in Excel. So if you teach them how to use an X lookup, and they're able to use that day, and then 2 days later, with that habit of learning, they're able to use it again, they're really building that habit of learning and that application of learning. And you can use platforms like Velsoft's mobile ready courses to develop bite-sized content for frontline workers. It's a great way
Josh,
to kind of implementing that.
You mentioned frontline workers. So, I mean, not everybody is actually working in an office, sitting at a desk, able to, pop open their laptop to take their learning. I mean, what are some ways, I guess, to deliver learning through people's phones or tablets or things like that that might help out with building that habit of learning?
Yeah, I mean, mobile learning, and you'll see here, that's a trend here that we're talking about. That's a major trend. More and more mobile first development is becoming a thing. We are accessing 60 upwards to 75% of our entirety of learning, or our entirety usage of internet on our mobile phones, our tablets, or our mobile devices. So I think that's a real practical way, especially when you start looking into areas or places where people are not sitting in front of a desk when they're doing their learning. So if you have frontline workers, engineers, municipal workers who are out in the field who need a chance to learn, mobile is likely the way they're going to interact with that learning material.
So
And
would you say, Josh, that there's or could pinpoint any industries that may be lagging behind with mobile learning adoption, and maybe why?
yeah, I would say there are industries that are. So I would say construction is an example of one. Municipal government, to some extent, on its frontline employees has been one. And traditionally, the reason I think that has been is it hasn't been practical to create or implement courses in a mobile friendly way, or the workers haven't had access to mobile devices that were connected to the internet when they were out in the field. Now that's less and less so. Most mobile devices have some sort of at least some sort of a way to connect to the cloud for information, whether it's putting in information or whatever. So that is really changing. But because of that legacy, I do think there is definitely some lagging that does happen. Now, something that I want to point out, though, is if you're not doing mobile learning already, you definitely should be. 87% of employees prefer learning on mobile devices. That's a stat from HR Dive in 2023. That has probably
That's
only increased. So that's
yeah.
significant amount of people want to be doing learning on their mobile devices. It's why you see places like Duolingo and similar and Khan Academy and places like that leaning into their mobile learning environment, because that's how people are learning today, and they expect that in other environments like just their work environment or their educational environment.
Makes sense.
That leads me to the other trend, which is reskilling. Reskilling is paramount. It is. I'm going to quote a stat. This is from the World Economic Forum for 2023. Actually, I think the stat they just released their 2025 World Economic Forum on the state of learning. I didn't quite have a chance to get that stat into this, but I will say in 2025, 44% of worker skills will be disrupted by this year. I think that's only increased. And that's not ancillary skills. That's not new skills. That is core skills. This job is irrelevant. They need to be skilled for a new job in their organization, in order to be relevant, in order to be competitive.
Okay,
Reskilling
so
programs. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just going to say. So with that, I mean, how can an L&D team, I mean, practically identify which skills to prioritize when a lot of teams are dealing with, resource reduction, or resources are just very tight?
That is an excellent question, and I would say that is the cheap
I mean,
answer
that's
is
the
that's going to
challenge.
depend on. That's the challenge. Yeah, the cheap answer is that that's going to be individualized to every single organization based on what those restrictions are. But to give some real substance for folks that are listening in is that um, it goes back to talking to and it could be collecting data on your learner, whatever that may be. Whether, and I would encourage you to do both quantitative and qualitative, because they both have different illuminations that you would be surprised on what you can do. You have to do both. I'll keep repeating that ad nauseum, that you have to do quantitative and qualitative research in understanding your learners. That being said, that's how you're going to do. If you need to do less with more, if you need to figure out, you have a tight budget and you need to figure out what learning you need to do for your organization, you need to figure out what's going to make the biggest impact.
Right.
And in reskilling is the reality there. If your organization is moving along a pace and no longer requires, I don't know, I'm going to pick on a field here, so apologies if someone out there is a stenographer, but if you're moving on to stenography, but you need somebody to understand how to do AI recordings and adapt and then translate languages, well, you need to know, they're going to have to reskill and basically become something akin to a prompt engineer from a stenographer. That's a real challenge, and you'll see that in the WEF thing. Their major piece was reskilling programs really need to focus on AI literacy, data storytelling, and finally, I think everyone understands is EQ. So it's huge. It's coming. The world is rapidly changing, and the state of work is changing. And with that becomes a real challenge of folks need to be reskilled into new roles, from roles that are becoming outdated, so you can utilize the talent that you have within your organization.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So that leads us to the business trends. I want to point out, one of the key, if you keep hearing me here state, talk to your business leaders, talk to your business units. It's important, because L&D, why it becomes center stage, is understanding what the trends are out there, what your business leaders, what your business units are facing, what is keeping them up at night. That's what you should be working on to solve in your L&D challenges. There's really three core ones: AI and automation. Like I said, you're going to keep hearing about AI. Uncertainty and resilience. Like I said, 2025 has been a hell of a whirlwind as it is, and I don't see that pace changing anytime soon. They need to understand that being comfortable with being uncomfortable is going to become the norm. And essentially, along with that, is there an extreme fast pace of change. So, jumping into the first one, AI and automation. I don't want to beat this one to death here, because I think there's so much. I think people do understand that AI is here to stay. It's coming. It's changing thing. It's, a Deloitte study said it's going to automate 30% of corporate training tasks. I don't know how many percentage of other ancillary tasks, but in L&D, things like grading assessments, generating course outlines, it really automates a lot of that. Now, what does that do for an L&D space? Well, this frees you up to do the fun things and the things that are going to take the educational experience to the next level, which is that's the ability to focus on strategy, to really do those quantitative and qualitative studies and understand what your learners need to know and how to develop that. And AI is going to be the trend. Like, it's only going to continue. With that comes a whole bunch of scary crap. Like, let's be honest here. AI has a whole bunch of phenomenal, from developing and running protein synthesis and understanding, all sorts of analyses in the biological space, or operating, engineering sort of municipal challenges that we coming up with solutions that we didn't even know were possible. Great. But it also comes with a huge, huge problem on the ethical side.
So I guess with that, I mean, what ethical considerations should the L&D space, be considering when thinking about deploying AI across their organization, or even within their own department?
Lots of ethical considerations. One of the biggest ones out of the gate is bias. There is a huge tendency with these models in their initial design for there to be implicit and explicit bias built into the actual learning model. So when you deploy these in your L&D space, you can enhance that challenge, and people can feel isolated and can feel the learning is not for them. A whole host of other challenges. That is something that you very much have to watch out for. One of the other things that you would want to watch out for is hallucination isn't so much of a challenge, but what you would want to watch out for is that critical thinking going away.
Right.
When you implement AI, it's like any other tool. You start relying on that tool to make all the answers for you, and when you do that, we're all guilty of this. You have a tendency to be like, "Oh, that's good enough." Take the time on your learning strategy. Make sure what the AI is spitting out to your learners, whether that is different things, make sure that it's actually aligning with that. And also, when it comes to L&D and it comes to business and AI use, make sure that people do understand what those AI ethical implications could be. A great example of in the business world is talent acquisition. We've seen all kinds of challenges with that, about applicant tracking systems dumping out people who have quote unquote foreign sounding names, different prioritizing people who are male, pale, and Yale. That is a real challenge. You need to train your individual business units on those challenges and ethics within AI. It's a real challenge, but it is a real opportunity at the same time. We live in a very fast-paced world and a very uncertain world as well. AI can help us with both, but it can also amplify both.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier sort of about that report you were reading about the AI operator actually doing a course on someone's behalf. I mean, how does that play into, if you're creating content and providing content to your staff, and they're turning around and using AI to actually take the course and get the certificates? What sort of ways can you I guess keep an eye out for that?
I have honestly, Michael, when I read that the first time, it scared the living crap out of me.
Yeah.
So I it really did, because I was like, this is a game changer in L&D, because I will say that measuring completion rates should be a dirty word in L&D, but it is a measurement. And if it's one of your core measurements in L&D, please come talk to me. We need to talk about some other ways to measure L&D. But if at the end of the day, it is a measurement, and all of a sudden your completion rates are 100%. Well, why is that? And is that
Right.
really 100%? Or are they just deploying an AI robot to go and do all the courses? Well, then what's all this L&D you just created? No one's learning anything. Well, you don't have to be you don't have, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's a real challenge that has to be solved.
Yeah.
And I think that's an element. Now, on the flip side though, AI can be very helpful. It can, like I said, it can automate those training tasks like grading assignments. Let's keep in mind the ethics challenges with that, but it can also help with some other areas. So I would say chatbots is a very interesting one. A lot of especially in L&D and or customers facing sort of things. There's a lot of standard questions that can be solved by chatbots. They don't have to necessarily sit in a forum somewhere. That can be automated. There are learner FAQs. Um, at this point, this was from a Deloitte study. Chatbots handle 40 to 50% of all incoming learner FAQs, and it tends to reduce response times by 50%. So
Wow.
there's a very practical area of AI actually making a fundamental difference, freeing up time for you to work on other more cogent challenges instead of just answering, oh, how do I log in? Right? Like a chatbot can answer that question for you.
So obviously, a lot of this creates, a little bit of uncertainty that comes into the L&D space. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I, I watch the news with tepid trepidation. I balance my news so I don't get depressed sometimes. I'll have to be admit. But it's a crazy world out there. There is a lot of change, a lot of things happening, a lot of paradigms being shifted, a lot of things we took as standard being questioned, and with that uncertainty makes people uncomfortable, makes people nervous, and there's a certain amount of resiliency that people will need help with. And there is, this was in 2023, and this was a few years ago, and things have gotten even more uncertain since then. 60% of CEOs, this is from PwC, cited that geopolitical volatility as their top concern.
Wow.
I don't I don't think anyone is arguing that number hasn't gone up. so so that is a real that is a real challenge, and you really have to be thinking that in your L&D space and your learning space is how do you develop resiliency? How do you develop um, mental health is with this with resiliency as
Mm.
well. How do you arm your employees to have some sort of armor and guard against uh, um, a world that is becoming increasingly unpredictable?
Hmm.
And the way to do that is well, one of the ways to do that, not the only way to do that. One of the ways to do that is really to include cross training, learning playbooks for crises. If you have a team that's in sales or you have a team that's in engineering and you're working to solve things, you need to make sure they're talking to each other. You need to make sure that one of the great ways of L&D is creating open forum L&D, open forum places where those employees can talk and discuss their challenges. Because sometimes the salespeople are like, "Oh my God, the sky is falling," and the engineers is like, "Yes, it's falling at a 12-degree angle." Like the thing that you have to do is that people don't want to feel isolated. They want to be able to understand that their challenges and that everyone is seeing them, and there's a certain sort of comfort to that for people to know that they're not alone in their own individual challenges. And if you can find ways to do that in L&D, you're really addressing overall that overall uncertainty and building that resilience within your workforce or within your educational space. You can find ways to do that. We can talk about ways in which you can do that, but that would be sort of something that would seriously think about.
And would you say, Josh, that kind of exhausts some of the ways that L&D can help balance preparing for uncertainty without overwhelming employees, or could there be a couple other strategies you might consider there?
Yeah, there is. I said about it earlier, and I think this is actually something very, very important. When it comes to building learning habits, a very powerful way in this, and I would say this is in developing mental health, is learning habits around um, putting on that mental health armor for your employees, finding out ways. And that can be something very inane and very simple, but it is something. And when you talk about micro learning, this is a perfect micro learning course, helping people understand that one thing that they're not doing. For me, it's drinking water. I know it sounds really ridiculous, but it actually is something that if you remind people in a learning thing, that is something they can do for their mental health. When you're hydrated, when you're healthy, your serotonin levels are in a better shape. There's lots of ancillary benefits that comes from that. If
Right.
you can come, I think that is a great way for balancing that uncertainty in a way that doesn't overwhelm them, because you can be like, oh, the sky is falling and here's the things you need to worry about. That was a classic trap we did in resiliency. Don't get into that trap, right? Get into the trap of drink water, get good sleep, sleep hygiene. Things like that are really things
Yeah.
that you should be teaching your folks to do in a very sustainable way that doesn't seem overwhelming and some sort of grandiose, like they need to functionally change everything about how they're who they are and who themselves, and have this existential crisis. You don't want to get into that. People are having existential crisis left, right, and center as it is. You want to find their way, help them, arm them with ways to sort of um, sort of help address those existential crises. And I would
Absolutely.
say learning habits and micro learning is a really good way to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So, with all of these challenges, both business and all these trends and change, and same with trends in, what the business and L&D is seeing, you know, well, how do you address this? Well, you got to set goals for the year, right? And what is addressing goals in 2025 actually look like? Well, it's developing a continuous learning culture. You'll see me harp on it over and over again, which is those micro lessons, those building the habit of learning is key to your organization. Skills based goals, really making the goals around the learning very applicable to that learner, really centered around skills. Agile goal setting. This is, yes, um, in a world that is constantly changing, you need to set up a goal that is capable of constantly changing with it. Emotional intelligence. EQ for the win, full stop. You got to help people be emotionally intelligent, and that is a ever evolving field, and that is also built around a learning habit. And finally, this one is ROI and impact on measurement.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this over and over again, and I'll continue to say it until I'm blue in the face. Uh, Completion rate is not an ROI measurement. There are other ways to measure L&D that we really need to be looking at. So that leads me right into the first one, which is ROI. Which is actually the first one I want to talk about is agile goal setting. So McKinsey did a study in 2023 which said agile organizations are 2 times more likely to hit business targets than those that aren't. So shifting from annual plans to quarterly OKRs, like reduce time to competency by 20% in Q1, that is a perfect example of a agile goal, right? It is very key. You understand what's going on. You understand what your goal is, but you have that flexibility in that goal. How you go about building these questions is, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but you need to go back and you need to do qualitative and quantitative studies with your learners, with your business units, with the folks that are trying to understand what you, with the audience whose challenge you are trying to solve. You need to understand them, and you need to build out goals for in the learning element that address those challenges in a way that is flexible. Gone are the days of, we're going to teach this X, Y, and Z, and then they're going to come out with that outcome. That's going to
So
fall on its face.
So with that, Josh, I mean, when you're in a situation where, maybe organizational goals or even departmental goals are changing quite frequently, how do you actually keep your learners motivated to keep in line with trying to hit some of those goals?
This is skipping a little bit ahead here, but I will say the answer to this is building a learning culture, and really getting a sense of, in your organization is building a way in which you are learning something on a daily basis. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes. And that really helps build a way in which you are constantly learning, and you're starting to get in, and learning should be uncomfortable. Okay. So if you're learning and you're at 5-10 minutes every single day where you're getting uncomfortable, but getting an outcome with it that's applicable, you actually become a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is a good thing, because this comes, hopefully I'm painting a picture here where if you can create an agile learning environment, you can create a habit of learning. You can create a way in which you're addressing the goals of your organization that is adaptable, but is also relatable within your organization. You can hopefully keep folks motivated when those goals are changing. And that is not going to change. In fact, the goalposts are changing probably more frequently and more increasingly every day.
Yeah.
So finding ways to find people to get comfortable with that is definitely key, and building a comfortable in the L&D space. What you can do to there is habit of learning and getting used to being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A lot of the challenges around goals and changing frequently, that actually comes to a bit of a cultural challenge within your organizations, and that's something that as an L&D person you should be talking about with your org design, your CHRO, folks like that, to say, hey, how are we addressing this from a cultural aspect, and how do we design L&D talk, do those qualitative interviews and say, how are we addressing this culture challenge, and how to then create course designs in and around that. So, one of the things I do want to talk about is, when it comes to agile is, while it's a bit of a jump here, I do want to talk about ROI and impact measurement. When we are asked to do more with less, which is something we are constantly being asked for in this space, we as L&D folks need to be better at measuring the impact of the training within the organization. Now, what does that mean? Honestly, that means measuring the particular end results of that training. What does it actually affect? Completion rates, please just get rid of that from your vocabulary. Only at this point, only 35% of L&D teams measure ROI beyond completion rates. So we still have a long way to go, but I would say let's really look at that. Advanced metrics like skill application rates or promotion pipelines really do show true impact. And I would say, one of the things that we have to start considering in ROI impact, it really starts at that early piece. It starts at your needs analysis within an organizational context. You need to understand as an L&D person what you are writing for and why, and what L&D can solve, and more particularly what L&D can't solve.
Right.
And you need to be very crystal clear on that when you're making your goals for the year on, this is what we're going to solve. This is the measure that we're hoping to attain. And ultimately at the end of the year, you can measure what you have and hopefully measure that gap of what you weren't able to accomplish. But you need to be very clear on that needs analysis, what the learning can train and what the learning can't train. It's a tricky thing, but it's definitely something that has to be done at the needs analysis stage.
Now, I mean, I guess talking about ROI and metrics, I mean, we want to get rid of completion rates, throw that out, throw that in the trash, don't ever say it again, that's a bad word. I mean, what is one of the simplest metrics you could implement today or tomorrow to start tracking that ROI in your organization?
A very simple one that I can think of that is, it's not a far leap from completion, but it is drastically different in its core. It's not completion rates, it's engagement rates. How consistently do those learners engage with the material that you are putting out within your organization? Are they looking at it on a daily, weekly basis? Align this to what your goals are within your organization and make sure they're meeting. But that's different than completion, right? I would far more prefer somebody looking at a learning thing that we put out that is, it could be anything, that is not complete, but they're looking on a day-to-day basis, than them completing it in one day, right?
They're
We're back to
progressing.
that class. They're progressing, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they're progressing, yeah. Like they're not looking at the same PowerPoint slide for
Right.
7 days.
I'll just sit on this
probably,
page. Yeah.
that probably wouldn't work very well. But it goes back to that adage, like I keep bringing up though, which is, you can't cram for a test the night before, and if you retain the material for the test, great. But then 3 weeks later, you have no idea what the hell you learned. I mean, a great example of that is most of us who went to university can remember maybe 5% of what we learned in university. I did a history degree, and I love history, but I can't remember 95% of what I learned. And because I didn't consistently build that habit.
Right. And you're not using it every day. You're not thinking about it every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I would say that is very much key to sort of overall an easy win for metrics. Another one would be, are you seeing those folks who are taking the training within a certain segment? Are you seeing them making measured progress in their career, whatever that progress may be? So if it's a sales team and sales training, are they making, are they closing more deals? If it is a construction team, is there less safety incidences? It's not a direct correlation, but if you can show those who have taken a certain amount of training versus those who aren't taking as much training or have taken none of the training, if you can show that gap, then you can show that your training is making a influence and there's a return on that investment, all the ancillary savings that have come along in that. The key is finding concrete ways to show that. Yeah. The challenge is so much of L&D is esoteric sometimes. We know in our heart of hearts, we know it's an advantage. We know it makes a difference. Sometimes measuring that is indeed difficult. I would say it starts with the needs analysis, figuring out what it is that you want to train for, how you want to train it, building that culture, building a habit of training, doing the micro-learning in a way in which that is comfortable for your learner to do, so mobile learning, and then in bite-sized pieces so they're able to take that information, apply it into the organization, and you will start to see those metrics that you're trying to measure from the get-go in your agile space. You will see them and you will start meeting those goals. So I know that's a lot to try to wrap a head around, but it's definitely that's the goal here, right? Is to sort of make those impacts as much as you can with the least amount of resources that you can. So that way, when you get more resources, you can do even more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that leads us to our Q&A.
Yeah. Do we want to throw that quick? Do we want to throw that poll question out there right now, or do we want to just open up the chat for any questions from individuals?
Yeah, so I'm going to lean on you, Mike, because my monitor that had the chat here has definitely kicked the bucket. So I'm going to lean on you sure. to give me those questions and to sort of stick handle in them, and I'll definitely sort of to answer them. So I think putting if we have some questions, we can start in the chat. We can start addressing them. If we want to do a poll question, I'm all for that as well.
Let me go ahead and throw up. Sure. All right. Awesome. Let me throw the poll question out there just for everybody. If you feel like throwing something into the chat, you certainly can. Essentially, just from everything we've talked about today, which trend are you prioritizing first in 2025? Would it be personalized learning, reskilling, or maybe mobile learning? So the chat is open if you want to throw in what you might be doing. And maybe we'll switch over while we're looking to see some comments come in there. I know we did have some pre-questions, so maybe we'll ask that and get a response to that. Is that okay, Josh?
Yeah, it works for me.
Cool. All right, so where is it at here? Okay, so an attendee asked before our session today, how do we measure L&D success when leadership cares a little bit more about costs? How do we
Look at your
respond
leader
to that?
dead in the face. Yeah, look at your leader dead in the face and say, okay, if you only care about cost, fine. What is it that you want to accomplish? And I genuinely mean this. Be somewhat, if you're running into that, if you're running into a leader that only cares about cost, you really have to be a little more aggressive with it. And you have to get down to and have that qualitative conversation with them and say, what is it that you want to accomplish? Get them on board, get them talking to you on what it is that they want to accomplish, and have them become your champion. Okay. Have them in that early part of the needs analysis. You sit down with them and say, what is it that we want to accomplish as an organization? Embed yourself with that leader and say, and then help you develop that course content or what course content that you need to go out and source and get. Help them be a part of that, because then you're shifting it from a cost to a revenue generator. That is what you want to do, because you have to shift that conversation. If you're stuck in an L&D as a cost center, you're never going to win. You have to shift that.
Right.
There's a process to that. I'm open to, if anybody is curious, I have a basically a 7-stage process on how to do that. So if you are curious, I would be happy to chat with you offline in more detail, because there's a lot to that question. However, that is the key, is really getting that leader on board and finding, or if say the leader, you can't get the leader on board for whatever reason. Maybe they're stuck in some sort of mindset that L&D is or HR is it's
an expense. It's
it's a cost center. You need to find a champion within your organization that has that person's ear,
right,
and work with them. Yeah. And same process, right? Like, help work with them, figure out what it is that leader wants as a goal, have that person in their ear, and then kind of work towards an overall solution. The process doesn't change, but your champion does. It may not be that leader specifically. It may be somebody that has that leader's ear in a way that leader is listening. I realize the dynamic can be very, very difficult sometimes.
Of course.
So finding ways in which to shift and shake that loose, but you got to get out of you have to get out of the L&D as a cost center, especially with all the trends we were talking about, reskilling being key, L&D taking center stage, and all the other ancillary challenges that are coming along with that. It can't be considered a cost center, and you have to start working with them to try to get them out of that mindset.
And I think that's where that sort of ROI and sort of finding those key measurement metrics to use that, kind of prove the positive impact that L&D is having. And that's going to help you hopefully make that shift with your leaders.
In an ideal world, sometimes some leaders just they don't budge, and in that case, that is a different challenge and probably a whole different can of worms. But realistically, I would say most people who are cost centered aren't actually worried about cost. They're worried about that cost not going to a result.
Right.
So that is progressing the organization. If you can prove that you spend, $50, $60, $100,000 in training and they get $1 million, I've never met a leader in my life that would say no to that.
Right.
So, but you have to prove it, right?
So
and that's the challenge. And often you have to get them on board, and you have to get a better understanding. You have to talk to the business leaders. You have to talk to the business leaders. I'll keep saying that, because if you aren't in bed with the business leaders, you're probably creating training, solving the wrong problem. And that's where you get into, this just costs.
Right. And I think too, like, if you're not taking that time to align, your initiatives to actual business objectives too, I mean, that's going to cause an issue, I think, down the line when it does come up to, budget season and people are trying to figure out where are we allocating our dollars. Leaders want to see that overall strategic objectives are being met. and it can be sometimes a challenge for L&D to be at the table for that.
Yeah, I'll say it this way: if you're in an annual budget, it's 365 days. You should be having 2026 conversations on what budget's going to be spent L&D. You actually should have been if you're in a calendar year, you should have been having that on January 2nd.
Oh,
Like
okay. Interesting, yeah.
you need to be ahead of the curve, not retroactive. You need to be proactive in your conversations. You need to be start addressing it. So that way, when you get to budget discussions in a calendar year in September or October for the following year, you're not oh, well, maybe we could spend this much money. It's like, no, we need L&D to solve this problem.
Yeah.
We're allocating this much. It's not if we're allocating, it's more how much.
Yeah.
And so you really have those. You really have to start having those conversations. If not yesterday, for sure, be starting to have them today.
Right. All right. So we're at our 5-minute mark before we wrap up here. Any other questions from chat, or I know we got the poll up there, a few votes in. I don't know if we have any stats on the votes.
Well, right now I
Okay.
got my monitor up. Looks like personalized learning is what people are leaning towards.
Yeah, that looks like it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
majority,
interesting.
like 60 odd percent, 60+% looking at personalized learning as a trend they'll focus on.
It's really where it is, and I'm glad to see that that personalized learning is the biggest. You know, it's customized to the learner, and it is engaging to the learner. That is practical for the learner, and it is something that they can use to actually improve their day to day. You know, it comes back to the core principles. You know, we've been since 1960s, 1970s when the initial andragogy principles came out. Like it's still there, right? Like people need to engage with their learning in a way that they think is relevant to them, that is going to help them, that is going to help make their job easier or their life easier, or maybe not make their life easier, but get the results that their boss wants.
Right.
So it really comes down to that, right? Like, so if you can find ways to, we've talked about some of them today, but like if you can find ways to create learning that is personalized to your audience, it really is key. So I'm glad people are understanding that. That is a key. That is the trend in 2025, if there was one. If there was one that was above the others. But I would say that is not unique to this year. I would say that trend has been only accelerating. And also as the world becomes more nuanced and complex, so you see, a world that is becoming less and less predictable by the day. Personalized learning allows us to adapt that learning to the context of the day, because realistically, that is something that's going to have to happen. Also, personalized learning is extremely practical.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody that, or you have a group of people that need to learn something fairly mundane, like a code, so like a building code or a legal code or something along those lines that's changed within your field. Well, having context on a personal way will make that far more engaging. So if you have something like, here's the code and this is this in the province or the state or whatever says X, Y, and Z, and you have to follow that. Okay, yeah, snore. We're all going to fall asleep. But if you can give it a concrete example in that learning that is very relevant to that person, and say the reason we're doing this code changes, it applies to you because if you don't do it, there's a risk of somebody dying. In this situation that you've sort of worked with, like safety ladder training or something along those lines, and you can come up with real examples, it really does personalize it a little bit. If you can regionalize it, any way in which you can personalize it, I think is really helpful.
So with our last minute, Josh, any final thoughts to kind of wrap us up here today?
I would say, my final thoughts is it's going to be a wild ride in 2025. Buckle up. But the L&D is here. It's center stage, and we're here to. Most of us got into L&D because we're curious, we're learners ourselves, and we like to try to change the world. And if we can get learning right, we can change the world for the better.
Awesome.
So, if on that note, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to myself, Michael, or anyone here at Velsoft, you'll get information on how to do all of that. But please do. I love to talk to people. I'm not, I know my role as sales director. I'm here to sell you something. I'm here to I want to have conversations with you. I want to know what's keeping you up at night. I want to help drive that goal of making learning better. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Michael, but I'm pretty certain that you're exactly the same way.
Here to help. Yeah, absolutely. Reach out anytime.
Awesome. Well, we're at 3:00 mark, so that's the hour, everyone. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. You will get a recording of this after. You'll get some follow-up information. You'll get a more detailed slide deck, all the information you need. I'll put lots of fun tidbits of information in there for everyone from our research. So, and if we get more questions coming in, we'll make sure to include those as well. Thanks, everyone.